Hey guys, this is going to be a bit more of a rambling, informal kind of video, just giving an overview of my character and some thoughts on the interactions that I'm using. I hope it gives you some ideas, and I'd love to hear any tech that you might be using that could be incorporated, or if you try the build out, what you think of it. So basically, I think that casting on Crit Comet and stacking spell levels is kind of boring conceptually. Especially at this point, it's been the best way to play a really strong caster for the entirety of the game, and I've just done a lot of it. So I'm always on the lookout for unique ways to scale clear and damage, and I stumbled upon this interaction from a video from a creator named Pompey. I'll be sure to link that in the description down below. You guys should go check that out as well. So basically what we're doing is we're using the @series rule unique staff, and we're going to combine this with as much cooldown reduction as possible. This lets us spawn a ton of mirrors, really as many mirrors as we can get. So you're seeing we're getting up to 5 mirrors, and they spawn every 0.58 seconds, so lots of mirrors. And what this lets us do is multiply frost bolts infinitely as long as we can keep spawning mirrors in the path of the projectiles. So what that looks like is this. Right, so we spawned a ton of frost bolts, and as long as we keep spawning mirrors, they'll keep going. Right, as you can see, it's sort of like the chain. And eventually these will turn invisible, which is pretty nice. It actually lets us have a lot of visual clarity. This is basically like an auto bomber playstyle, but you can actually see everything, which is really awesome. I think in order for this to happen though, you need to have this specific setting turned on. Dynamic culling. You need to have this checked so that it can actually get rid of these projectiles. But yeah, basically there's a ton of frost bolts around right now. We're using a gem to make them return through us. That also helps a lot with keeping the chain going as you're running around the map, but we will get over that later when we go over gems. So, we have a bunch of frostbolts going everywhere, but as we can see from the tooltip, these don't really have very good damage, right? Frostbolt has quite poor base damage. At 234 to 351. And like I mentioned earlier, we're not really stacking spell levels. 24 is nothing egregious. So how exactly are we getting damage? Like, where does this come from? We're actually using another @series unique drill neck. And what drill neck says is projectiles deal increased damage with hits for each time they've pierced, and they have increased critical hit chance for each time they've pierced. This is excellent with Frostbolt because Frostbolt has built-in pierce, pierces everything, and so we can stack our pierce up really quickly. Now this combos really nicely with Ice Wall because every time a Frostbolt goes through these, it's going to be piercing, and we know from Pompey's video that killing also counts as piercing. So if these explode, that doesn't matter. If you kill a monster, that also counts as a pierce. So we're going to be piercing a ton with Ice Wall. But one thing I realized after some testing is that this could essentially be automated with the new unique amulet, Eventide Petals. This skill basically, it's got a lot of text on it, but basically what it reads is it spawns a bunch of ice crystals when you critically hit things or kill things with critical hits. We do a lot of that, especially because we're scaling our critical hit chance so high. And so this is sort of a naturally self-sustaining engine where you're going to be spawning ice crystals automatically, which creates pierce for our frostbolts, which creates critical hit chance for our frostbolts, which will cause more ice crystals to spawn. So it's just a nice loop that really enables that auto bomber playstyle. We never have to cast Frostwall at all. It does give us a damage boost, so it's still nice to do. If you want, you can press it on bosses, you can press it on rares, but it's really not necessary at all. Same thing with our elemental weakness. I know I mentioned that this is an auto bomber, kind of like a 0-button build, but you'll see we have a lot of buttons on our bar. We'll talk about these later, but none of them are really strictly necessary. They're all kind of utility / nice to have. So let's take a look at the tree. So like I mentioned, with our Edziri mirrors, the most important thing that we're doing is taking cooldown reduction. So we come over and we take it here, we get it here, and we path all the way down to take it here, and take it here. And everything else we're doing is really just efficient damage nodes on the way. So getting crit bonus, projectile speed, crit bonus, crit, some damage gained as Ice Crystal Life to help scale our Verglas damage. We'll go over that later. Some curses, and of course on the Frostbolt weapon set, mostly just damage, a lot of crit. And so this is not really like a final min-maxed version of the build, but I'm pretty happy with this tree. Initially I was using a split personality to come up from here, and while that did save a few points, I actually found that having the jewel slot open was a lot more valuable than that, so I'm not using that anymore. Like I mentioned, we're using Chronomancer, which is convenient because of a couple of these cooldown recovery rate nodes, but I actually don't think that this is the optimal class to play. I think Varashta would be very strong. You could get a lot, I think, comparable defense, if not better defense. You can use a focus with a staff while on Varashta, so you could use that along with a 3-socket focus, socketed with 12% cooldown reduction runes each, in order to get 18%, because that gets halved by the Ascendancy. And so you get 18% cooldown reduction compared to this 12% cooldown reduction, so you get a little bit more. You'd also get a spell skill from the focus, which is nice, and you know, the defensive utility is a little different, so super viable Ascendancy there. Gemling I actually think is really interesting. Gemling gets a just ridiculous amount of Verglas damage because you scale Ice Crystal Life really high, and you get a bunch of projectile speed, both of these from quality stacking. You also get a lot more projectiles on your mirror because mirror scales projectiles which shatter mirrors are copied additional times based on quality stacking, so you'll be at more like 11 rather than 9. I also think Lich is really good. Lich has 3 separate, really strong, multiplicative damage scalers that potentially snapshot on Frostbolt, so that actually has potentially the highest damage of all, along with free low life and really, really good defense as well. So it's hard to say what the best version of this build looks like. I think a lot of things are viable, but the most important takeaway is to try things. Use your brain. Don't think of this as a strict build guide. It's more of a discussion of concepts that you can try to incorporate into your own character. So another interesting thing you'll notice about the tree is that we don't have any defensive points, and that's kind of a sacrifice that we have for taking all of this damage and cooldown reduction. Really our only defensive node is CI. So where does all of this energy shield come from? We have 7,200 energy shield. How is that possible without any investment on the tree? No investment really from our jewels at all. We don't have any defense anywhere, so how are we doing this? Well, we're actually using another unique called Skin of the Loyal. And what Skin of the Loyal reads is that, along with other attributes, or rather other defenses scaling based on other uncapped reses, we specifically care about cold resistance. So our energy shield is increased by uncapped cold resistance. And this chest itself has no defenses on it, which is a little bit nice. We can runeforge it for free to get 120 runic ward, but otherwise basically offers us nothing other than a bunch of elemental resistance. And so what we're doing is using a lot of cold resistance on every single piece in order to scale this really high, using our overcapped cold resistance to scale our energy shield value. So you'll see right now we have 541% overall cold res. That's what's getting us to this energy shield number. You'll see if we take off Skin of the Loyal, we go all the way down to like 1,000 energy shield. So this is giving us, what, 6,100 energy shield? That's way, way, way more defense than you could ever get in this slot from a rare with no investment in the tree. So this thing is really doing a lot of work for me defensively. And the way that you are able to make items like this is with a new item called an elemental flux. So let me go grab one of those and we'll talk about that. What an elemental flux does is it allows you to have multiple resistance modifiers of the same type on a single item, which is really, really strong, especially when you combine it with the ability to increase the quality of a piece of jewelry to up to 40% this league, as well as the new increased explicit resistance modifier magnitude from an alloy. So this ring has like 250 resist on it. It's pretty absurd, and it's actually carrying, along with my Mage Blood, resistances for the entirety of this character, letting me use this ring slot kind of as a utility piece. We'll go over that later when we go over the rest of the gear, but one kind of trick that I wanted to showcase that you can do with fluxes is you can essentially divine just your resistances by swapping them back and forth between two different fluxes. So as you can see, we have a roll of 44 cold res and a roll of 43 cold res. And if I use a crackling flux on this to change this over to lightning, now we have 43 and 44 lightning. We'll change it back to cold. We have 42 and 45. So this is kind of an interesting trick you can do to divine only your resistances, which I don't think many people know about. Okay, so let's go over the gear in more detail. We're using Widow Hail. This is really nice just to scale what we're doing with the drill neck. Basically just helps us ramp our pierce a lot faster than we would otherwise. It's a really good damage scaler. Helm is pretty straightforward, it's just energy shield and res. We've talked about the Eventide petals. What you want on this, most important, is the ice crystals have maximum life, and ideally a Runeforged version with a plus level to all cold skills. Runeforged garment, Skin of the Loyal, we talked about this as well. Getting a 3-socket one is really nice. You want a perfect roll on the elemental resistances if you can, but basically just stuffing cold res in here to scale energy shield. Big cold res ring to scale energy shield. Using dream fragments, a cultivated version, because you can get increased ice crystal life on this, in addition to that you can't be chilled or frozen. So this is just a really nice utility ring. Got a little bit of cold res on top, which of course for us is just 30% increased ES, which is fantastic. So this is just a nice piece of utility. You could use a big rarity ring in here. You could get more cooldown reduction on a rare ring with some of the new spell modifiers from the Genesis tree. There's a lot of options here, different things you could play around with, but I've been enjoying this ring so far. Much like the helm, just energy shield and resist on here. Using a Mage Blood with double bismuth, quicksilver, and gold. This is really the only rarity we have. This is kind of a holdover. I use this Mage Blood on multiple characters, so I don't want to change it. But I don't think this is the optimal role for this character necessarily. The boots are interesting now. These I actually spent a good bit of currency crafting. These have a 30% increased cooldown recovery rate roll on them, in addition to plus 15 spirit, cold res, a decent amount of energy shield, and move speed. I can make a guide on crafting some of the ideal pieces for this build, I think, once I put a little bit more time, a little bit more currency into it, but for now, just be aware that this is something you can do, and having that increased CDR on boots is really, really nice. Just some standard charms. These could definitely be upgraded. I didn't even realize I had a normal stone charm in here. We can fix that. But this would ideally be like a cat, probably. Yeah. Kind of a bad Lapiangas. And that is our gear for this sod. Of course, in the secondary weapon set, we have an Atziri's Rule. I have a pretty good Atziri's Rule. The one you have doesn't really matter as much. What's most important is putting a perfect flux on it so that you get level 20 Mirror of Refraction, because the what's the term? The rate at which mirrors appear in your presence is scaled by spell level. So getting as high a level of Mirror of Refraction as possible is super important as well. Alright. And let's talk about gems. So, I used to be a time snap, time freeze skeptic. Like I said, I really wanted this to be kind of a zero button build. and I tried out all of these different combinations. Well, I guess not really Temporal Rift and not Inevitability, since these are also buttons. I actually just tried out Quicksand Hourglass and now and again. But basically, it feels fine, but I think the defensive utility that you get from Time Snap and Time Freeze is just extremely powerful. We have 6 charges of Convalescence. That's kind of just ensuring that you never die, which is really nice when you're running juiced content. This build can really run anything. I haven't done like super top-end Expedition, but I've done plenty of 200% daily blasting in cities with 4 tablets, 20 breach rares with effectiveness kind of farming, and this performs really well in that sort of content. So rest assured, I'm sure that you can make a version of this that can do Expedition as well if this one can't, but I'm reasonably confident that it would be able to, especially given the defensive utility setup that we have right now. So back to gems. What we're using is Cooldown Recovery 2, Second Wind to get another charge, and then Rapid Casting just to make it go off as quickly as possible. Exact same setup in Time Snap, or rather Time Freeze, but also Prolonged Duration and Magnified Area. In our mirror, using Cooldown Recovery and Overabundance to get us a 5th mirror instead of just 4. And then this is really outside of the Mage Blood, which is not necessary, the most expensive piece that I think is actually pretty critical to the performance of the build, is an Uhtred's Augury to get +2 levels to this, because, like I mentioned, the mirror appearance rate scales so heavily with gem levels as well as cooldown recovery rate that you just having level 22 is like night and day. It's 0.58 seconds for a mirror appearance, and if I take this off, it's 0.65. That's worth like 50% cooldown recovery rate, if not more. So this is just a really big thing to have. In our Midnight Zenith, using Glacier to get more crystal life so that Verglaw gets more damage. Elemental Focus, this just deals a little bit more damage, not super important. Overabundance to get more crystals, and finally Cold Mastery, level 22. I'm not sure if there's a breakpoint, but there was a point at which this was hitting 20, and I believe that was a breakpoint to get more crystals as well. In our Frostbolt, we're using Breachlord's Amalgam. This is really nice. It allows our projectiles to return to us, or rather forces our projectiles to return to us. They'll do that after splitting from the mirrors, so they sort of spread out and then come back through you. Once you get a good understanding of playing the build and you've played it enough, you kind of have a visual in your head of what the Frostbolts are doing, and you'll start to understand that Breachlord's Amalgam is really critical to keeping the chain up as you're moving, especially throughout maps that aren't particularly open. So this is a really important piece of the build as well. We use Valentis Propulsion to get a bunch of projectile speed, also important for keeping the chain up. If your projectiles are too slow, you'll be running and they won't be able to keep up with you and the mirrors that you're spawning. Cold Penetration, this could be Rockiatas as well, of course, but it's a bit too much for me on this character at the moment. Considered Casting, because we only cast this once. It doesn't really matter that we're reducing cast speed. Of course, the Valentis Propulsion, it's going to be a little bit less projectile speed, but I think the damage makes up for it. And finally, Verglaw, which is just going to give us a ton of damage when we break an ice wall. It's like 65% damage gained as cold, which is excellent. In our Frostwool, we use Anne Citadel, Calm's Madness. This basically makes it so that this takes up like a quarter of the screen when we cast. Just a lot of crystals for us to be piercing and exploding, which is really nice. Using Spell Cascade. That's also a contributor to the size of the crystals that we're spawning. Arbiter's Ignition is interesting. So on my staff, I have 10% of damage gained as extra fire for this purpose, and basically when we ignite an enemy, we get Elemental Archon. It's just a free 25% more damage multiplier, and even though it would be nice to have up all the time, I didn't bother anointing Dominion. I don't think it's too big a deal to have up all the time, and I think just for convenience's sake, Barbaric Strength is fine. but it is a nice boost to have here and there. And then finally Glacier, of course, helping boost our Verglaw damage. Elemental Weakness just has pretty standard curse gems. Heightened Curse, Efficiency, Magnified Area 2, Focused Curse, and Cold Mastery. Same with Blasphemy, just a Blasphemy Temp Chain setup with Magnified Area, Ritualistic Curse, and Slow Potency. Our Convalescence has Cooldown Recovery 2, Prolonged Duration 2, and Second Wind 2 for charges. And then finally, I'm experimenting with running a Time of Need setup as well because we're using so much cooldown reduction already. This gets down to about every 2.7 seconds, so this is nice for just clearing curses, clearing ignites, clearing shocks. Obviously we are CI, so we're not really benefiting from the heal, but clearing debuffs is just another fantastic thing to have, so put a cooldown recovery 2 in here as well. And those are the gems. So what's next for the build? We could definitely upgrade a lot of different things. Our jewels are pretty mediocre. They're mostly just critical damage. I didn't even go over them because they're so mediocre. We could get a Prism of Belief for plus levels to Frostbolt. Those are rather expensive, but they would be a lot of damage. We could get Proj levels and projectile speed on gloves, maybe sacrifice some energy shield for a slightly stronger damage setup there. I could experiment with more rings, and of course we could build this on a completely different Ascendancy and try things out there. So still a lot of frontier left to explore for this build. Like I said, I'm interested in hearing whether any of you guys try it, whether you have any tech that you think could be incorporated, and just generally what you think. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.
power that we deserve!
I think not, Mad Wolf.